Today on Planet Visionaries, I'm speaking with Dr. Ben Mirren, a sound artist, wildlife DJ, and scientific communicator. In 2023, Ben was selected for the Explorers Club 50 list, proudly supported by Rolex. It's the annual recognition of 50 people changing the world in fields from science and culture to exploration and conservation. Ben and I talk about the connection between sound and storytelling and how this can aid conservation in very real ways. I'm Alex Arnold, professional rock climber and founder of the Honnold Foundation, bringing you stories of inspiring people who are helping to solve some of today's most pressing conservation issues. In partnership with the Rolex Perpetual Planet Initiative, this is Planet Visionaries.
My name is Ben Mirren. I'm an ethnobiologist who focuses on the bridge that sound builds between humans and the rest of the natural world. And I explore that primarily through sound art, science, and storytelling. When I was 3 years old, my parents bought me a book on penguins, and I couldn't read it, but I memorized all 19 species in the book and started imitating the penguin sounds, and that's when they realized they had to take me to zoos and parks and just outside in general. They had a penchant for listening and imitating the natural world. So I started picking up bird songs in my neighborhood on the outskirts of Boston, and it just evolved from there. Where I studied the wildlife trade for my PhD, and after 10 months of looking at songbirds in cages, I needed a break. So I started tracking down the birds, and I remember finding myself on the shores of Western Bali, in Balibada National Park. The first bird that I heard that morning, it alighted on a tree in the darkness and went. And it was an oriental magpie robin, a bird I'd never seen in the wild before. And if you're looking for that money shot as a sound recordist, it doesn't get better than that. Music to me is just another gateway to the natural world that allows science and particularly conservation to be more inclusive, because you don't need a PhD to make a difference in this world. Making the invisible world visible to me is a daily practice, because working in sound, most times you don't see anything. It's all felt, it's vibrations. But the whole world is singing all the time. There's a symphony in your backyard right now.
Hi, Ben. Welcome to Planet Visionaries.
Hey, Alex. It's great to be here. Thank you.
What do you do?
I'm an acoustic biologist. I study sound around the world, and it's not just the sound of nature and wildlife, it's the sound of people, because I think of us as part of nature, and to me, sound is a bridge to connect more deeply with our fellow living things.
Expound on that.
I guess the technical training that I received for my PhD is in ethnobiology. Okay. And I studied the songbird trade in Southeast Asia, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry where people are catching birds for their songs, retraining them to sing for human amusement, and then competing them in these stadiums that have multi-hour singing competitions. And this is a microcosm of a larger issue I think about a lot, of how sound connects us to nature and inspires us, but that inspiration can take a lot of different forms. I've been a birder my whole life, and I've always enjoyed listening to birdsong in nature, but for millions of people across Southeast Asia and really the world, birdsong is a source of entertainment, a source of status and pride, and a commodity. But our project, called The Price of Beauty, looks at what that means and how we can plant the seeds of conservation in common ground.
How did you go from being interested in animals, like, loving birds, loving birding, to a formal education in ethnobiology?
I was a closeted birder for most of my life.
As many birders are.
Yeah. I grew up and still have ADHD, and that gave me a lot of imposter syndrome as a kid. I didn't think I could hack it as a scientist. And so I had this love for nature kind of as its own thing. But when I started living in other countries, I noticed that no matter where I went, I was fascinated by birds and by music, particularly beatboxing and hip hop culture. And they occupied separate tracks in my life until my early 20s. And I finally figured out, I'm either totally screwed or I'm going to find a way to bring these two things together. Everybody now. And so music was a form of therapy and kind of reconnecting with this hidden side of myself. And when I started expressing my love of the natural world through music, all my friends, and particularly the beatbox world, were like, yeah, great beat. What was that animal doing when that sound was captured. And then I realized, because of their beautiful questions, I had to start going and recording the animals myself to make these beats. I quit my last office job in 2014, made a couple YouTube videos doing this, and then Nat Geo found them, and we made a children's television series called Wild Beats that's based on this premise. And from there, I just got such a boost of confidence that an organization like that could say, we like what you're doing. This set me on course to recording more and more animal sounds. And then the closer I got to wildlife, the more I realized I want to study what's happening here. And so I went and got my PhD at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology.
Let's get into how do you make beats with animal sounds?
Yeah. I mean, the best way to do is to have a microphone and to record something that has captivated you for one reason or another, and you bring it home. You listen to the track and you just wait for moments that are really compelling, and you cut them out and put them on a keyboard or a launch pad. And this is what I did with my
Which
first.
is the same way that a DJ makes some beats. I don't know. I'm not hip enough to know anything about making cool music, but is that basically the same process that a DJ does?
It's my process, but if I were doing it, I would track down the bird, record it as best I could in that moment, the same way a photographer would, 95 to 99%.
Try to get the money shot.
Yeah, getting the money shot. Also, the bird may be sitting there, but it won't say anything until it's really relaxed. So you'll just be like, I flew 10,000 miles for this. And
just stand there silently holding your microphone for a long time.
Yeah.
Like,
but that patience makes the bird song a gift, not a possession. And then when you bring that gift home, you can chop it up or clean it up however you want. I don't change the key. I work in the key of nature, of whatever habitat I'm working in. So it's all microtones. And if you add digital instruments, you have to detune them to match the natural sound. It's very, it's kind of some mental acrobatics there. But then I'll lay them out on a keyboard and play them just experimentally. And I'll maybe
play the bird sounds?
Yeah. Like I'll jump between sections of the song that I've cut up and put on individual buttons.
Okay. And
just bounce between them. And sometimes I'll hear something and then I'll kind of lay my voice down on track, like and I loop that and that keeps going. And then I make the sounds fit that or vice versa. And I build up from there.
So presumably, since it's a podcast, at some point we'll just have some. I'm like, I want to hear a final. I want to hear bird sounds. I want to hear the real thing.
A lot of people have asked me over the years, do you imitate bird songs? And the answer is yeah. I put it through multi-species peer review. Can I fool a colleague? And then can I fool the actual animal itself?
You mean with your own bird sounds?
Yeah. And so
you can definitely fool me. I want to hear bird sounds.
Well, so I do a lot of work in Borneo. This is the helmeted hornbill. It's the largest hornbill in the world. And it's, to me, the voice of the jungles of Borneo.
You sure that's not a monkey?
Right? Yeah. That's the thing. That's one of my bird impressions that really is dead on. But it's also kind of low-hanging fruit because it's right in my vocal register. If you do something like the Oriental magpie robin, which also lives in Southeast Asia, let's see if I can do this one. That's a red-breasted nuthatch. Black-capped chickadee.
Cheeseburger. Yeah, my grandpa loved chickadees.
Nice.
And nuthatches.
That's amazing.
He had his bird feeder out front.
And you'll hear them all over New York if you go to Central Park. And that one's been tested in both
mostly
contexts.
only hear horns here.
Yeah.
Do you hear chickadees here?
It's hard.
You hear chickadees here because you have a very attuned ear to it.
I seek it out. But one of the inspirations for starting off my wildlife DJ kick was just not hearing that outside my window. And I'm never one to talk smack about urban nature and like how New York doesn't have it. There is for sure nature here. And a lot of people don't have the opportunities that we've enjoyed to go to far off places. So you have to cultivate what is in your backyard and really tune into that. But I hadn't grown up in a city. And so the music to me was a bridge back to my childhood. That was sort of the therapeutic part that I mentioned.
But in what way do you think your work, can positively impact conservation?
In addition to just making it more inclusive and getting more people involved and having more solutions on the table, the sounds themselves really do change the game. In recording these songs, we have tools for training artificial intelligence to recognize bird songs over landscape scales. If you feed an artificial neural network with enough of these bird songs from nature, it learns how to recognize them through machine learning. And then you can record for months at a time in a rainforest and use that network to detect the actual birds in an
species.
Yeah. And you got to have a human checking it. We're not quite beyond the realm of false positives just yet, but that's one example. And when you take these birds out of nature, particularly in tropical island ecosystems where there's a high rate of endemism and speciation across just little patches of land in these oceans, you can have individual songs on each island. Even if the birds look the same, they sound different because there's this patchwork quilt of avian cultures.
Just like European languages.
Exactly. There are for sure bird accents and languages. Each bird, at least in the group we call songbirds, typically learns how to sing from its adult parents and neighbors in a period of neuroplasticity that can be just a few months long. And so if you're taking birds either out
much like humans developing language.
Yes, very much so. But so you would ask me how it changes things, and I mentioned the AI component for like detecting songs, which then you can use to advance policy to protect a particular patch of forest if you do detect like a really rare species in a place where people didn't think it existed. When these birds are maybe extinct in the wild and they only live in cages now, which is true for some of the birds I study, the people taking care of those birds are trying to rehabilitate them if they're rescued from trade, and then in some cases breed them in captivity and release populations into the wild. But without the right song, these birds can't survive. So one thing we want to explore is playback studies in captivity with the wild songs, using my recordings and archival recordings to just help them relearn their natural song and gain that voice back so that when they go into nature, they can actually communicate with each other. And if there is a wild population, they'll be accepted because they have the right tools.
Do you think they can learn language like that without the context?
I don't know.
But I suppose that's the whole point, is to find out.
Right. This has been done in Hawaii with the alala, the Hawaiian crow, and with varying levels of success. And I'm not an expert on the study. I wasn't involved, so I can't speak to the details. But there's precedent for trying this kind of thing from people that I really respect. So I'd like to give it a shot.
But I suppose when you're talking about the human relationship with nature, I think that it's easy for folks who live in a city or just like live in the suburbs. You don't often have these like full-on experiences with wild animals. No. But yeah, like last week in Yosemite, I climbed the first 1,000 feet of a route on El Cap, just like out with a friend doing a fun thing. But a couple hundred feet up, we left our backpacks clipped to the wall, which is like pretty standard thing. And then we kept going, and then we were going to grab our pack on the way back down. And anyway, so the ravens are really smart. And I mean, no ravens are smart, and they unzip bags and they do whatever. But in this case, I had zipped my bag. I had the flap tucked inside. I had it cinched down with a strap. Basically, 2 ravens came down. They opened the bag. They unzipped every compartment. They took literally every single thing out of the bag, including one of my shoes. They took my shoe out of the backpack, which I was like, it's almost the same size as the bird itself. I was like, they took my friend's raincoat out. Like, basically, they emptied my whole backpack over the course of like an hour and a half. We weren't even gone that long.
To the wind.
Well, yeah, it all just fell down the wall.
Oh my God.
And so then my friend and I, when we rappelled back down, we like scoured the wall again to collect all our trash and pick up our stuff. And the shoe that dropped was like one of my high performance climbing shoes. I was kind of like, I need my shoe back. So I like rappelled the whole wall to find my shoe. But it was just an interesting example where you're like, ravens are really smart, and they're pretty crafty like that. They're
super crafty. Yeah.
Like, given enough time, they will get into things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that relative concept of intelligence is really interesting to watch when you work with like a big group of species. You look at ravens and then other corvids that are relatives of ravens, and our conception of intelligence as we measure it in birds changes when you shift out of that family, but it manifests in other ways.
What do you mean?
Some birds, like the alala, really can vocalize in a very evocative way if they're around.
That's a corvid as well, though?
There have been a number of cases of crows and ravens imitating people in ways that most people think only parrots do. They can reproduce sounds that sound exactly like the source.
How do birds make those sounds?
Imagine we take our larynx, and it's a fork in the road instead of just one pipe. And there are interacting muscles that open and close those separate channels. So that allows a bird to harmonize with itself. I've recorded thrushes, for example, which are beautiful songbirds that live here and are also in Southeast Asia and coveted for their songs. I've mostly seen them in cages. There was this coffee plantation in the interior of Bali where I had heard a rumor that an orange-headed thrush, or anis merah, as they call it, had taken up residence. And this is a bird that's almost completely gone from Java. It's the Javanese subspecies is endemic to Java and Bali, and you cannot find it in most forests nowadays. In this guy's backyard, 2 of them had taken up residence. And I walked up to him with my friends and just asked in broken Bahasa, have you seen this bird? Is it around? He said, oh, it's right over there in that tree every morning. He brought us down and it alighted within 5 minutes on the branch. And when it sang, you could hear triad chords, like harmonics happening, where the bird would sing multiple notes at the same time. And the way that happens is you have some notes coming out of one side and other notes coming out the other. And sometimes birds you can hear birds going through puberty because the young singers will try to match the sounds, and maybe they'll sing a kind of a glissando sweep that goes from low to high. Something like that, like a cardinal.
How did the musical side start for you? Because I can see you birding as a kid. I can see the scientific side and even capturing birds. But how do you learn how to beatbox?
I remember being a 90s kid, like watching Nickelodeon cartoons, like after school. And I would just beatbox along with the theme songs of the shows that were on TV. I didn't know what beatboxing was until I was like 18 years old.
But you're just always drawn to make the music yourself.
Yeah. It feels like another language for me.
I think one of the things that I love about doing Planet Visionaries episodes, though, like every guest that I interview is on a very particular path. Everybody's approaching some conservation problem in a unique way. They've brought a unique skill set. Basically, every guest has like some crazy story where you're like, why do you do that? And how? And like, how did you get there? And why do you come up with that idea? And like, why in that particular way? But I think, if you're very passionate about some specific thing, it's like you might as well run with that as far as you can and see where it gets you, because there's a lot of room in the world. Yeah. There's a lot of latitude for that. Absolutely. Those types of passions. And I'm sort of like you're a perfect example of like you really went a different way. I'm like, all right, wildlife DJing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. What can be gained from better understanding animal communication like that? I was at
a talk with E.O. Wilson like 10, 12 years ago, and I remember him answering a question in the audience when someone asked, I'm thinking about pursuing a PhD. Is it a good idea? He said, there's no greater community than the one you build when you go after your passions. And the way I think about it is, you leave the beaten path, and taking that leap of faith on yourself as well as your ideas is scary. There's some risk there, but when you go for it and you meet other people who are like also bushwhacking off the beaten path.
Yeah, off the beaten path.
You're like, where have you been? Like, I've been looking for you. I didn't know, but for my whole life. And that's what I now have colleagues who make music with nature and do sound art and study bioacoustics, and like those are my people. It's my tribe, so to speak.
Yeah, it's not dissimilar to the climbing community, because
sure.
Certainly as I've come up as a climber, I mean, it used to be a much smaller world. Climbing's like become much more mainstream and much more popular and whatever. Actually, it was interesting hearing you talk about some of the sort of external validation, like when you're recognized by National Geographic and things like that. Basically just getting a nod from some kind of position of authority that's saying that what you're doing has some value. When you were talking about that, it immediately reminded me of my first sponsorships as a climber. Because when you're just going out rock climbing all the time, you're kind of like, I love doing this thing, and it's so personally fulfilling.
Yeah.
But is it worth doing? Like, is there a point to this? And then basically as soon as, a brand or something sort of tells you that what you're doing has value, it is easier to stick to the path.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously no one's going to be a wildlife DJ, exactly.
If they want to, great.
Acoustic biology, like, what's your advice to somebody who's interested in this field?
Well, I mean, there are endless stories to tell, and what you bring to the table matters because there's no one else like you. The brighter you shine, the more you light up the world. Whatever your set of skills or passions, know that your gifts are welcome here and they're needed. So show up as you are.
Yeah, the brighter you shine. I mean, I like that too, because I feel the same way about sort of personal passion. Because there's just so many people on earth that it's like, there's always somebody doing something, it's like you may as well do the thing that you can do best.
Yeah. This is what I was saying before, is you try on a lot of hats and you figure yourself out, but you eventually, in making some correct choices and some incorrect choices, you see what sticks. Shining bright is really important, but it takes a while sometimes to find your light. And knowing what is authentic is a hard journey to pursue. So I think it's worth seeing you trying things out and putting yourself out there, but recognizing that your definitions of success may also change.
Yeah, can you talk about the Explorers Club 50 and what it meant to you to be, included in a group like that?
I've been first a member and then a fellow of the Explorers Club for about a decade, and have gone through those halls, wearing my different hats and trying out different versions of this thing that is now coalescing into what I really love and want to do. There's a lot of different takes on what I do. Some people have been really supportive. Some people have been very confused. And I understand.
That's fair. Yeah, that's totally fair.
Yeah, very
like,
reasonable.
Wait, you do what? Why?
Yeah. It's hard to put a label on a moving target. But through the Explorers Club and through all these, communities that we're parts of, there are people who are just doers. They make things happen and they take those risks and they put themselves out there. And to receive that recognition was unexpected. And really lovely because it introduced me to all these people I didn't know. I think our world is very small in some ways because these are all people doing niche things. But it was so cool to look at the 50 people from my year. I knew maybe 4 of them. And then I was like, more inspiring people.
Yeah, know that all 46 of them are equally on different paths, like doing things that are challenging and new and pushing themselves. And
can teach me something.
Yeah, they're sort of all kindred spirits.
Totally, yeah.
So I guess maybe to wrap up, where do you see your work going?
I've been developing a concept for a lab called the Creative Conservation Lab that could take any number of shapes. I technically have the qualifications to pursue a career as a professor. In which case being a teacher and having
Would you like to, though?
I'm debating it. I think at the end of the day, the culture match matters the most to me because having these flexible definitions of success means that CCL could be a physical space at a university. It could be a YouTube channel. While I wait for one of these irons in the fire to really light up, I'm doing gig work and trying to practice what I preach. Let's talk in a year and I'll tell you what my institutional title is because I don't know what it's going to be. But
I don't even know if I care about your institutional title. I'm just curious where the work goes. Because that's the interesting thing with the storytelling. Just the idea of broadening human connection to the natural world in a totally different way. I think that's kind of ultimately what you're getting at is.
Yeah. I don't know what conservation is going to look like at the end of my journey, but I hope more people are involved and that it's more creative, that people know that getting a PhD and doing all the things I've done is not the only way into it.
Well, I appreciate taking the time to chat.
Oh, thank you.
It's
Alex.
a total pleasure.
Yeah.
I'm sort of hopefully anybody listening will just, not bother with their PhD and go beatboxing and connect to the natural world in their own way.
There you go.
Can you make the weird sounds that ravens make? The guttural No, the weird gurgling thing that sounds like evil.
Oh, can I do the sound of evil? No, I don't think so.
Yeah, okay, because there are a bunch of noises in the forest in Yosemite that I'm always like, what is that? And it's one of them is the gurgling noise that ravens make.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of evil.
Yeah.
And you're like, what is that?
I think
it's
I need to.
And it's a gurgling or something.
Yeah, they almost laugh.
It's
they're
weird.
like they're plotting. I cannot imitate it yet, but maybe if I do a raven residency, I'll work on it.
Big thanks to Dr. Ben Murin. We will put a link to his work in the show notes. Planet Visionaries is a podcast in partnership with the Rolex Perpetual Planet Initiative and a Sony Music podcast production.